welcome everybody. My name is Joel Hutchison. I'm joined today by my colleague Steve Mostella. All right. I'm joined by my colleague Steve Mostella. We're customer consultants with Tableau. And today we're going to be covering Tableau extensions and TabPy and some real-world use cases which we discovered when working with our customers. Before we get into the demos, just a real quick introduction about ourselves. This picture that you see in the backdrop, this is I was lucky enough to take a family trip this summer to Switzerland, and I actually ran up the mountain to the right-hand side. It's the mountain that North Face was actually named after, the brand North Face. So what you can see there on the right-hand side is a visualization that I did of my run. So the squiggly line represents me trekking up the mountain. The red parts of that squiggly line are where I'm moving very slowly, probably even walking. And the green is where I'm actually picking up speed running back down the hill at the end of my run there. So two of my passions, definitely trail running and visualizing things in Tableau and using our APIs to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Steve now.
Hi, my name is Steve Mostella, and I'm a customer consultant with Tableau. Hi, I'm Steve Mostella with Tableau. I've been with Tableau for a little over 4 years now. The first 3 years with Tableau, I've worked directly with our customers in the Southeast United States. And then for the last year, I've been working with our partners, enabling our partners to get better at Tableau and working with their customers and bringing Tableau into their organizations. And when I'm not at Tableau, you can find me hiking, running. I don't have a recording of that like Joel does. I did hike there. That's actually Lookout Signal Mountain in Chattanooga. And I am based in Nashville, so you can find me and my family at many of the live venues there are in Nashville to see live music.
All right, so with that, we're just going to get right into our first use case, which is an inventory analysis with writeback. This is a use case that I came across when working with one of my customers. Wow, this is crazy. All right. It seems to be going in and out, but now it looks like I have volume. So he was tracking his orders, his total amount of spend, and his off-contract spend, comparing it, as you can see here, to the current year and the past year. What he wanted was something a little bit more like this, where he could look at his top products, and I've added in the inventory reorder levels. That wasn't part of his use case. But he wanted to see, okay, these are my top products, and we can see how much we've been spending. So as you hover over, we've got the Vision tooltip. I can actually see, okay, for these natural apple chips, I spend about $27.89 per order. And you can see the dips there over time, and we can hover over any of our products to see what we've been spending over time. So this was great, but to add to this, we wanted to be able to say, okay, what am I spending now, and what could I be spending if I were to buy this in Amazon? So I'm going to jump out of here, and we're going to grab an extension to do this. So this is an extension that I wrote. You can find it out on GitHub, and we'll provide all the information on how to find it. So I dragged out this new object, an extensions object. So you've probably heard about it this week through some of your sessions. This was added in 2018.2. So we now have the ability to add these extensions. And when we do that, this pop-up comes up for us. And it says, do we want to pick an extension that's local to our machine or one that's in the extensions library, or gallery, I should say. Now, if I click that, that's going to take us out here. I've already got a window open. And this is our extensions gallery, where you can see some of these extensions created by third parties, by some of our partners. Some of these are free to use. Some of them, those third parties actually charge for you to use them. But you can download these and play around with these as well. So for today, we're just going to come back in here. And we're going to say My Extensions. I'm going to navigate out to My Extensions folder. And we're going to grab this first one, the Amazon Product Search Development. All right, so once I load that, you'll notice on the right-hand side there, we get the Amazon Product Search, and it's telling us we need to configure this extension. That's the first part, is to configure what we want to work with here. So it doesn't necessarily need to have, every extension doesn't need to have configuration, but we do allow that option for you if you want it. So what configuration does for us is it takes the values we've selected and stores them as a key value pair as part of that workbook. So here I'm going to say which of the sheets that I have in this dashboard that I want to interact with. Now, I'm selecting this current stock levels, and you'll notice it's a radio button making me select one of the three. If I wanted to, I could make my extension interact with all of the different worksheets. Just for demonstration purposes, I've had it select just a single one here. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And now, this extension will actually interact with this bar chart here. So as I click in, you'll notice we're looking again at that Apple chip prices. Let's see. All right, there we go. A little bit slow on the internet, but here we're looking at Expo dry erase markers, and now you can see on the right-hand side it's refreshed to tell the Amazon Product Search, hey, we want to see what we've been paying and compare it to what you currently have as the price in Amazon. So here, as I hover, you can see we normally pay $33.72, and it's selling for 4 cents more. We can see that up here. So it's actually taking the price that I've been paying, gives it to the Amazon API, does the comparison, and lets us know if we'd be paying more or less at this point in time. And we can do that for a couple of these. So the ones towards the bottom, I know we actually have, let me see, we're actually seeing that turn to a green text indicating that we'd be saving 37 cents per order here. And we can hover over these. So that was great. That met the use case of my customer being able to, in real time, compare what he had been paying to what Amazon is currently charging. So he could find out, where can I save some money right now? Now, to add to this, and to make it a little bit more interesting, not part of his use case, we added in right back. So you'll notice the Buy It Now feature down here. So I have a current inventory of 10 and a reorder of 40. We can simply say we want to order 30 now. And click Buy. All right, it tells us that that's successfully ordered. And you'll notice the bar chart instantly bounces up there to indicate the order. We can do that here for another one. Maybe we want to increase the number of Uniball pens we have, and we'll say we'll order 40 of those as well. And hit Buy It Now. My internet's a little bit slow today. It's probably a little slow because of the weather, maybe, like the rest of us. All right, so there again, you see that the bar bounces up, and we've completed the purchase. So a couple different things going on there. Obviously, you saw the write back and the ability for the dashboard to pass on the average product price over to the Amazon Product Search. Now, before we leave here and go into some code, I want to highlight this context menu up here at the top. You'll notice the Configure button. We can actually click that, and it'll bring back that configuration window again. And we're going to see how you would set that up as well when we look at the code. You don't need to have that context menu, but it is an option for you if you want to include that as part of your extension. Other things you can do in here, you can reset permissions. You can go to the About, and you'll notice it gives you the information about this, this extension as well as a little icon here, and we'll talk about how you add that icon in a second. And you can also reload and debug options, and if we have time, we'll show you how to debug this as well. All right, so that's the first use case. I want to jump into the code now and take a look at this. So you'll notice the first thing we're going to look at here is a Trex file. So when we said we wanted to select our extension, we had to point to that extension. And what we were pointing to is really just a Trex file. And that Trex file could live locally. You saw when we clicked the extensions gallery, it actually prompted us to download a Trex file locally. So you would be downloading them and then accessing the Trex file locally. Inside these Trex files, if you're to create your own, I would recommend simply finding a sample out there and copying and pasting the values that you need to and switching them. First off, you have up here your product ID. You'd want to swap that. You would need to give a description for your extension, author information. So here's my information where you can find this out on GitHub. Most importantly is this right here, and this is the source location. This is the URL that's going to tell Tableau Desktop or Tableau Server where to point to find the code for that extension. You'll notice I'm running this in localhost here with an HTTP. And I bring that to attention because if you were to move to production and it's no longer localhost, you will have to move to SSL. So keep that in mind that you'll need to secure it. Our blogs definitely detail how you can find free certs out there to secure if you don't want to pay money for those certificates. Below that, we have that icon. So when we saw that Amazon icon, I actually created that right here. And this is base64 encoded. So if you have an icon that you want to use and add it to your extension, what you can do is grab that icon, go out to the internet. There's actually web pages that'll take an image. You upload the image, and it gives you back base64 encoding. So a nice way to create those icons, add a little bit more personalization. As we move down, we see the context menu here. And that's where, as I told you guys a moment ago, if you want to have that menu that allows you to configure in the extension, this is where you would actually turn that on as part of the Trex file. It's not necessary, but it is there for you if you want to do it. We're going to compare that to another Trex file real quick, just to show one other feature that I didn't talk about, and that's this permissions in here. So if you do want to set up permissions to have full data, meaning all the underlying data, you would actually turn that on with permissions inside your Trex file with this argument that you see here. So that's pretty much the Trex files. Let's take a look at some of the code that went into this. We're going to start off with the JavaScript. All right, so let's scroll to the top here. So up towards the top, you'll notice I have throughout my code quite a few console.logs. These are simply allowing me to log back to the console where, if we're debugging, we can actually see those messages. I know what's going on in my code by logging these messages. We initialize, right here, we initialize our extension. And then I want to dive down here. We're actually going to look at a couple of these functions. The first one I want to call attention to is this configure one. And this is simply where I call that pop-up window, which opens another web page for us and allows us to configure this extension. So that's the one we saw with the 3 radio buttons that determines which of the sheets we want. So if you wanted to have your own pop-up window for configuration, there are examples out there. You could follow an example like mine. As we move down here, let's take a look at some more key functionality. And this one is the refresh data source. So after the write back happened, I need to call this function. This is the one that's going to tell the dashboard something has happened and we need to actually refresh the data sources. It could be one data source, it could be multiple data sources, but this will actually trigger the refresh and allow us to see the data bump up with those bars that we saw. And again, you see I'm always including somewhere in my code a console.log so I can see that actually occurring when I'm debugging. Another piece of functionality that we saw here was the get selected marks. And this is where, when I was selecting the bars for the apple chips or the gummy bears, I needed to figure out what marks were being selected and pass that over to the extensions API to that Amazon product search. So we were actually looking for the Amazon ID, which is actually stored with this data set. I was grabbing that Amazon ID, passing it over to the Amazon product search. The search would trigger, find the current price, and then compare it to my average price that was already paid. So this is how we accomplish that with the get selected marks here. All right. So let's see if there's any other things I want to call attention to in here. All right, let's go and take a look now at a different piece of functionality. And this one is actually the Amazon search. So in this one, you'll notice down here, we're actually instantiating that Amazon product search, product advertising API and API right here. And then we're going to grab that product Amazon ID, or ASIN number, I guess is what you might refer to it. And that's what we're going to use our search for. Now, if I didn't have that number, we'd also search on just the product title. And then you'll see right here below, I'm bringing back all the values that I care about from that API that I want to work with. The next one we'll look at here is the write back piece. And for this one, I grab my database credentials from a file. I define what my underlying tables will look like. So I have two tables that are part of this write-back, one for the inventory and one for the actual orders. And then I actually just simply perform those updates or inserts into here. So it's an update if it's going to my inventory levels. When I want to bump those up, it'd be an insert if it's a new order that I've just logged. And I'm bringing all the values in there. So that's how those occur. Again, this is all server-side on this point, but I'm actually writing here to console if I hit any errors. And my console would be back over here, and you can actually see some of the product searches that have occurred from there. All right. So that's some of the key pieces of the code. Again, all of this will be available for you out there on Dropbox, and you'll be able to access it and play with it if you want. I want to now walk through how you might debug this, if you were to, if you're so inclined to debug it. So back in here, I've already loaded this up for debugging mode, but you have to start up Tableau Desktop specifically for debugging. And to do that, whether you're on Apple or on a PC, what you would do is you go to a run command. I know it'll be a little bit different on a Mac, but you need to provide these extra startup parameters here. So basically, if you guys can see that, I don't know if it's very small, it says -- remote debugging port, and we're specifying the port of 8696. And that'll open up Tableau Desktop just as we see here, and then we can start debugging from a Chromium browser. So we'll just quickly grab our Chromium browser. I'll open that. Now, we actually specify which version of Chromium browsers to work with. So there is a preferred Chromium browser version out there. You can find that in our documentation as well. And it will say we want to localhost 8696. And it will say, here's the extensions that are available for inspection. We can go ahead and click ours here. All right. And now you can debug this just like you would any other web application. So if we come in here and I look at my console, you can see we're having some network issues, but then we can see what's going on behind the scenes in our extension. So let's go back to our extension now, and maybe we'll search for something. Click this, get back some information on our gummy bears. And if we come back now to this, maybe I should put this on the side here so we can see it. So you can see the console is loading up with what's occurring there as we click on the various pieces of information. So a good way to debug as you're starting to work with these extensions is to use Chromium in conjunction with the debug parameters that you pass to your desktop. Everything else that you would want to debug with this can be done on the server side. It's just for the things that are happening client side that you would want to debug that way. All right, so that's it for this piece. I'm going to turn it over. We're going to jump back into now the presentation and cover a couple slides before we get into Steve's use case as well. All right. So, starting to make noise again. All right. Don't know why that's happening, but. All right, so here's some of the technologies that we use to put this together. So first off, we had Python. You guys saw me walking through some of that Python code. We used Flask, which is a web framework for Python. I also leveraged the Amazon Product Advertising API to go out and grab the latest value or latest prices of the products I was interested in. The backend database where we did the write-back was a MySQL database running on my machine. And then finally, we used the Tableau Dashboard Extensions API. These are the pieces that made this all possible.
And do you have to use all of those extensions or those components? Do you have to use Python and Flask and MySQL?
No, you could definitely use any programming language you're familiar with. Could be used here. You don't even need, obviously, the Amazon Product Advertising API or MySQL database. For extensions, the only common thing you would need is definitely the last one there, the Dashboard Extensions API.
And for the Amazon API, is it free or do you have to pay for that?
It is a free API. You do have to sign up for it, and then they'll give you all the tokens you need to actually work with it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what these extensions are. We saw them and how they're used in the first use case that we just went through, but what are extensions? You probably already guessed by this point, extensions are simply just web applications. They're web applications that allow for two-way communication between a dashboard and the interactions that a user is having with that dashboard and that web application. So that's the big thing there is that two-way communication.
And does the web server, does it have to be running on the Tableau server? Can it be running, or should it be running on another server?
So great question. It should be running on another server. I always tell my customers, don't put anything on a Tableau server, whether it be a database or a web server that isn't part of Tableau. Yeah, I would say if you have an extension out there, you're looking for a place to host it, find a server that's not Tableau server to put it on. So we looked at the top right example there of a write-back example or extension that actually used that Amazon product API and talked to another API out there. But there's a lot of other things that extensions could be. So we have in the top left there an example of a refresh, which will automatically refresh a dashboard as you're working with it. Below that, and you might have seen these from the extensions gallery, there's a lot of custom visualizations that are possible as well. So you'll see the Sankey chart, a radar chart, some other charts there. One of our partners has actually put together this custom visualization, Show Me More extension, that you drag that extension on, provide the necessary dimensions and measures, and now you have a Sankey chart with just a few clicks. So if there's visualizations you're looking for that weren't possible natively in Tableau, you might want to check out an extension like this. Then in the bottom right there's another extension I found out on the extensions gallery that I liked, and it's for performance analysis. So what this does is you drag the extension onto your dashboard, and it's actually going to look at all the filters, parameters, the number of sheets you have, and how long things take to load. And then it will give you a grade on how well or how poorly your dashboard is performing. But beyond that, it's actually going to recommend prescriptive actions you can take to make it faster. A lot of times if you've worked with performance recordings, it tells you what's slow, doesn't necessarily tell you how to fix it. So having something like that is definitely a nice thing in your toolbox.
In order to use an extension in a dashboard, do I have to be a server administrator or site administrator to put it in my dashboard?
So you just need to have, if you have desktop access, you can start working with extensions and grab that Trex file. If you're a creator and you're on, not a creator, if you're an explorer and you're working online through web authoring, you can also grab an extension from web authoring and use it from there as well.
So even through the browser, I have the ability to create an extension as long as I can access that Trex file.
Exactly. The big thing is being able to access that Trex file. All right, so throughout the course of the week, if you guys have attended several of our developer sessions, you've probably heard a lot about the Tableau developer platform. Since I've been with Tableau now 2.5 years, we've been adding more and more APIs, more and more developer tools to this platform, and it's very exciting. Today, as you can see, we're talking about extensions, which is highlighted there in orange, but there's definitely other components here as well. So you have embedded analytics, you have data connectivity, data science, as well as automation, all parts of that data or Tableau developers platform. Now, I like to think of the different APIs more separated by their names, commonly seen names that you see up here. So you'll see at the bottom there we have our web data connector, our REST API, which is used for automation, the document API, and the Tableau SDK. Now, the SDK has been renamed now to just be the extract API, so that one has changed in name. You'll also notice at the top we have the embedding API. This was formerly known as the JavaScript API. Now, the reason I have the embedding API and the extensions API at the top is I want to highlight how I think about these two to maybe help you guys distinguish the two. So I like to think of these two APIs as kind of a yin and the yang of each other. So the embedding API allows us to take a Tableau dashboard and put it in an external web application, external portal. Now, on the flip side of that, you have the extensions API, which allows us to take an external piece of code, an external web application, and bring it into a dashboard. So while they're similar, they definitely do kind of opposite things. So hopefully the yin and the yang explanation helps you guys think about those two. So what is needed to work with extensions? If you're like me, when I first heard about Tableau extensions internally, I saw there was an alpha. I wanted to immediately get involved. I wanted to immediately develop some of these because I got excited. Anytime there's a new API, I want to immediately get into the weeds and figure out how to work with it. So if you want to start working with one of these and start developing your own, what you'll need is obviously the Tableau Extensions API. You'll need to write a web page and have a web server to host that. Again, that web server can be local host. It can be your own machine at first, but as you move to production, it will need to be a secure SSL-enabled web server. You'll need that Trex file that we looked at, which is actually going to point Tableau to where that extension lives. And then finally, you're going to need Tableau Desktop 2018.2 or Tableau Server 2018.2 or higher. So it won't work with any of our older versions at this point.
And how do the users get access to those Trex files?
So when we saw the extensions library, if we click on those, that'll actually download those Trex files locally to your own machine, and then you can reference them from there. If you were talking about internal Trex files, you'd probably want to set up some sort of shared drive where people in your organization could go out and grab the Trex files that they care about and use them on their own dashboards. So there's the path to the extensions gallery. Again, you saw that pop up automatically, so you don't need to jot down the path. If you're just dragging extensions onto your dashboard, you will actually see that pop up take you to the browser, and you'll be able to see what extensions are out there. We will be adding more and more of this as we move forward. So I think there's probably about 25 extensions there now, but you'll see this library grow as we move forward.
And if I create a really awesome extension, how can I get my extension onto the gallery?
Yeah, so if you do come up with your own extension, the path would be, the email you would actually email that to is extensionsgallery@tableau.com. We have an inside group. The product managers are actually on that group. They'll evaluate it, look at the code, and if they like it, they'll submit it, and you'll have it up there as well for other people to use. So if you go out there and you download one of these extensions from the extension gallery, I should say you will probably be pointing to an external server. So that the one we talked about for a SAN key, that's actually an externally hosted server. So they're not actually giving you their code. They're giving you a Trex file, which is a pointer to their code. So just keep that in mind as you start working with extensions in your environment. Now, speaking of security and using extensions, I did want to call attention to how a Tableau server administrator or a site administrator would work with these, and how would they manage extensions in their environments. So first off, if you're a site administrator, you can specify which extensions should be allowed to run. You can specify whether they should prompt the user when they first load up that dashboard to let them know that they're using an extension. And you can also specify if that extension should have full access to the underlying data, full data. Now, as a server admin, you can specify which sites are allowed to use extensions. So, if I wanted to turn off sites or extensions for my HR site, I could completely block that site from having the use of extensions. And you can also block certain extensions altogether. So if I knew there were some extensions that I just don't want my users using, I can block them as a server admin.
So the server admin has the ability. Does the site admin do that too, or just the server admin block and whitelist?
Yeah, so the server admin has the ability to block, blocklist is the term we're using, and then the site admins have the ability to whitelist, if you will. All right, so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Steve, and he's going to walk us through his use case. So tell us about what you're going to show us here, Steve. I left it up, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So in my time at Tableau, I've had a lot of times customers ask me if Tableau can do some really interesting, unique things, such as being able to know the driving distance or the walking distance between 2 points. Oftentimes, in Tableau, the only thing that you can really do on a map is between 2 points is just use our radial selection, but that's just to see how far something is as a crow flies. Or I've had customers want to know, I'm doing analysis on stocks because I have data for that, but how can I get the most recent stock price or the recent trading price of a stock that I'm wanting to analyze as well, along with my historical analysis. And I even had customers ask me, being able to track a plane of all things within Tableau. And so where I came up with this example is that, well, if you can track a plane, you probably can track a train as well. And so, and lo and behold, you can actually do that with Tableau. And I know when I was working with Joel, Joel's reaction was, what? I didn't know you could track a train, with Tableau. It totally blew his mind. He had no idea that was even possible. And it is kind of crazy to think that you could do that with Tableau. And the way that you can do that, believe it or not, is you can do that with TabPy. And so I'm going to switch over here and do demo of this. Switch here. And what we have here, let me put this into full screen mode.
All right, looks good.
So what we're seeing here, this is a map of downtown Chicago, and this is in the Loop area. Right, actually, hold on, my fault here. Let me switch back here before I get into that.
You got to switch back?
Yeah, switch back again.
He's getting a little ahead of himself.
A little excited, that explosion excited me there. So when I'm actually thinking of tracking trains, it actually reminds me of Chicago. I'm originally from the Chicago area. I grew up in the Chicago area. And Chicago is famous for many things. It's famous for its skyline and architecture. It's famous for deep dish pizza, famous for Wrigley Field. There's many museums out there as well, such as the Museum of Science and Industry is what you're seeing here. It has a ton of parks. This is Millennium Park down in the Loop area, or just outside the Loop. And also it's famous for the Chicago L train, the elevated train. That's Chicago's transit system. And Chicago transit system is actually the second busiest transit system in the United States. It stretches from the north side in Wilmette all the way down to the 95th Street on the far south side. You can take a train from the Loop, from the downtown area in Chicago to O'Hare. That's the blue line to the northwest side. And then take the orange line down to the southwest side to Midway Airport.
So, Steve, how often do the trains go by?
Yeah, that's something that, a lot of times when people have taken trains such as I have, is want to know, like, how often does the train come? And I know that's something that's a lot of people, such as even Jake Blues here, wanted to know too.
Well, it ain't much, but it's home.
How often does the train go by?
So often you won't even notice it.
Now, the train didn't always come that often, especially when it was 1 outside, or minus 17 degrees Celsius. Many times looking down the tracks, waiting out there for several minutes, 10, 15 minutes, being cold. I didn't know where that train was, and I always wanted to know, it'd be awesome if I knew exactly where that train was at, because that way I could time it and get to the station just right before it comes, as opposed to waiting out there and freezing. So, with that, now I'll actually go to the demo here.
All right, let's see how you did this.
And as you saw earlier, this is actually a map of downtown Chicago. And what we're looking at, this is where I'm wanting to take the orange line to Midway from the Loop. And what we're also seeing is these blue squares. These are all the different stations, the L stations that are down in the Loop. And what we're also seeing up at the top here is that if I'm leaving from the Art Institute, which is right about here, and I'm going to walk to the Adams Wabash station, which is just not too far away, I can see how far of a walk that is, and then also how long it would actually take me. And so I'm going to refresh my view here, and to see where the train is currently at.
The internet did seem a little slow here.
There we go. Finally, it's going to refresh. So now I'm actually making a couple calls out here, Joel. Making a call out to the Chicago CTA API. Let's do that one more time. There we go. And let me just move my view here a little bit.
So is that the train we're seeing down
so
there at the bottom?
that's a train. So yeah, so it's going to be arriving at 11:28:18 a.m. And we can see that it's right now it's 11:19. So it's only going to take me a few minutes to get to that train station. So I could put it at another location here. I know that oftentimes that you deal a lot with federal customers, and then if you're ever out there at the IRS, which is at 230 South Dearborn here, I'll put that in. We can see how long of a walk that is.
Probably the only person who's memorized where the IRS building is.
Yeah. how long of a walk that would be to that particular station. So it's a little bit longer walk. It's same distance, but it'd take about 5 minutes in order to get there. And again, what this is actually doing is that it's going out to the Chicago CTA API. It's requesting for the orange line and for the particular stop that I'm interested in, which was Adams and Wabash, and it's bringing back the time as when it's going to be arriving. And then I'm also using the Google Distance Matrix API to find out how long it would take me to walk there and how far that is. And so now actually tying this back to extensions is that I know that I've had customers over the last few years that they wanted to refresh the dashboard automatically. Here I'm doing a train. You guys maybe are not all interested in tracking a train, but you have a dashboard that you want to refresh on a regular basis. You might have some monitors up maybe on the shop floor, on a manufacturing line. You want to refresh that every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Well, before in Tableau, you'd actually have to obviously publish that to Tableau server. Then you'd have to get that share code, and then you'd have to put it into a web page. And if you had several different dashboards that people wanted to do that, you would have to create 5 different web pages to do this. So I'm actually going to use an extension here that any of my users could put into their dashboard and then refresh that dashboard periodically. So
is this the same refresh one that I was mentioning earlier?
This one's a little bit different. This one is actually, it comes from the sample one of the sample extensions that are available out on GitHub. I just repurposed it. I just renamed it from UI namespace to auto refresh. So I'm going to take that extension, just drag it out onto my view here. And then let's go to the Trex files, choosing refresh, as Joel was showing earlier, pointing to that Trex file. And this is very similar to what Joel had, is that this one actually needs to be configured. So I'm going to configure this, and I'm going to configure as to what data source that I'd like to use or that I want to be refreshed automatically, because I could have 2 or 3 different data sources in here, and how often I want to refresh that. So we're going to do the start auto refresh. And then let's just size this here, where I just did it for 30 seconds. Let's move this over off to the side here.
Now, while we're waiting for that, I just want to add a point here, Steve. Tableau did release just recently the ability to skin all of the pop-ups and configuration to match the UI that Tableau already has. So that's a new feature that will be coming in short order, that you'll be able to skin them to look the same.
Yeah, so that I could have actually had that extension in there so it didn't take that big white space there. And so now it's going to refresh every 30 seconds, and it's going out to the CTA API and then also the Google API there to get that distance as how long it would actually take me to walk there. And I'm just going to move this around a little bit so you can see that a little bit easier. So now it's going to refresh every 30 seconds. There isn't anything that I need to do. I don't have to go put it out to a web page again. And now I can allow all my users for whatever dashboard that they're interested in refreshing it to do that automatically, as opposed to doing one individually for every single person within the organization. So as soon as that updates here, I'm going to get out of escape mode here, or full screen mode, and I'll show you how I actually did that.
So I noticed you used TabPy. Would it be possible to do this with an extension, or what was the reasoning behind using TabPy here?
Yeah, the reason I could do that. I could certainly have done an extension and maybe even a web data connector. But the issue is that it would have been a lot more components that I would have had to put in there. So just like you, I would have had to actually use a database for that, and then I would have had to write a lot more code. And this, I wasn't interested in doing that. I just wanted to have that TabPy server just running, and because I wasn't interested in capturing any of the historical information. I just wanted the immediate information. It just would have made it a lot more complex. And so I'm going to go over to my view here so we can look at the calculations that I used in order to do this. So the first one, it was actually this get train location. And what we're doing here is that we're utilizing the CTA API for this. I'll make this a little bit larger. And because what that API is doing, it's just making it's a web service request. It's a web service making HTTP requests. And so the information that I'm passing to it this is the web URL to make that request for the arrivals. And then down below are the parameters I'm passing to it. So I'm passing to it the route. That's the orange line, blue line, brown line. And then the next that's the stop ID. That's not stupid. I didn't type that in. That's actually the CTA API. And that's the ID number for the Adams Wabash station. And then I'm saying that I want the output to actually be JSON. So it's going to return back a JSON, which I'll then need to parse in order to get the latitude and longitude. And finally is my developer key, which I kind of cut off there. So I make that request in this line right here. And then once I do that, right here, these two lines, what I'm doing, I'm getting the latitude and the longitude just one time, and then I'm returning that both as a string. Because then what I do, I just have two more calculated fields here that just parses that with a simple string search, doing a left and a right to get that latitude and longitude. And then that's what I'm putting on my column and row shelf.
So it's one call out there? Is that
yeah,
correct?
so now, it's just making one call out to the CTA API, and then I'm just parsing that in order to get the latitude and longitude, and that's how I'm plotting that on the map. And then for the distance, I'm doing something very similar. I'm actually using the Google Distance Matrix API, and you'll see that calculation is very similar. And the request for out to Google for using the distance matrix, and it's going to bring back JSON too. And I'm passing parameters such as the mode. Many of you, when you go out and actually get directions, that ask you, how do you want to get there? Do you want to take by car, or by walking, or even by public transportation? So this is going to be walking. I could have parameterized that as well. And then the units, the default is metric, but it's the United States, so it's the imperial is what you're using for the English measurement there. And then my origin of where I'm starting from, so where I had that 100 South Michigan Avenue or the Dearborn Street address, that's my origin, and the destination is going to be the latitude and longitude that I'm pulling, that's in my data source for each individual stop. So I'm making one request out there as well. And then I'm asking for the distance and the duration, and then I'm just returning that into my calculated field here, which is distance to station, and then that's what we're seeing right here in that particular field. So I didn't parse, I just broke it out. I just bring it all in with the distance and then the time to walk that distance. And so besides that, just tracking where that individual train is at, I can also look where all the trains are at that are running in Chicago right now. So this what I'm asking here, I'm asking the API for each line, let me know what for that very first train is, where it's at, and what the next stop is. So we had all 6 lines here. Actually, there's 7 lines, the Purple Express, but that only runs until, I think, 10 o'clock. But this is all 6 lines here and what the very next stop is. So this is actually current as what the train was reporting. Uh-oh.
We'll be
I'm
fine.
going to be fast. We'll have to
fine.
be fast here. And then the next one here is actually, I actually limited the number of stops in the loop on this particular view. So that way I could see all the trains that were arriving in the loop, where they're currently at, and what their next stop is. And then lastly is walking time, and this is something that I've been asked several times by customers, is that I want to put a new branch or an ATM in a particular location, and I want to see from key areas in the area or the region how far it would actually take to walk or drive there. And so starting from this 100 North State Street address, this is how long it would take to walk to the Lake Street station, the State and Lake station, and also the Clark and Lake station. So I could have numerous other points in there as well, and actually change up that address, put in different addresses to see what that optimal distance is, what the actual walking and driving time, not just as the crow flies. And so, you know, in addition to, I know not everybody out there is wanting to track trains and things like that, and what are some of the other use cases that you could do and utilize TabPy for?
Well, before we get to that.
Sure, before we get to that.
Let's go through what you used here.
Yeah, so what I actually used here is I actually used Mapbox. I didn't use that OpenStreetMap. I actually chose a Mapbox map. And then I utilized TabPy. You can go out to the Tableau GitHub site and download TabPy. And then there's the Chicago CT API that I used, the Google Distance Matrix or Mapping API that I used, and then I created that script calculated field. Those script calculated fields is what Tableau is able to use, or what you need to use when you're talking to external services like R or Python. And then finally, as the dashboard extensions, the dashboard extension I used was the UI namespace that just comes right out of the sample extension library that we have available too. And so, you know, besides just being able to track trains, as you saw there, because like I said, not everybody really wants to do that. I know not everybody wants to do that. But as being able to use that integration for fleet management, be able to track your trucks or trains or even buses, where they're at any given time. Doing location analysis, so finding the distance between a new office building that you're planning, and how far it is from key points in the region. Being able to go out to get the current stock price for the stock that you're doing analysis on. Doing HVAC management, such as if you have a Nest, you can actually connect out to Nest and pull back information such as what the temperature is in a particular room. Actually, I have a Nest which I can do that. And then even doing pump monitoring as well. So there's many other use cases that you could utilize that TabPy integration and actually view that information within Tableau.
All right, I'm going to walk us through some of the resources that you guys have out there that are available to you. So the first one we have up here is the TC18 developer track content. So all the content we've presented today, whether it be the workbooks, the code, and all the other developer sessions, all of that will be uploaded to Dropbox, and you'll be able to download everything and take it back home and work with it at home. Additionally, and hopefully you've heard about that this week, we are introducing a new Tableau developer program. With this program, you actually get a free sandbox to play around with these APIs, a safe place to play with the APIs. You also have early access to our alphas and our betas for these APIs, so you get your hands on them early before they're released. And then also in there, if you want to actually attend like the developer stand-ups where they're walking through and talking about what's going into that release, they actually invite you guys to attend their stand-ups and hear internally what's going on there as well. The last piece, and Steve also mentioned this, is Tableau on GitHub. There's numerous projects out there. We're always adding more projects to GitHub, so you'll find TabPy there. You'll find all of our APIs as well as documentation, sample code, and tools to test these APIs as well. Now, there's only one more extension session this week at conference, so it is right after this. If you're interested in attending, it's Extensions FOMO Cure. But throughout this week, we have had several different extension sessions that have been available. So this is the list of them. You can, again, find this content. It will be posted. So check it out and watch them after the fact, because I think all of these are recorded, so you can watch them when you get home as well. And finally, please fill out a survey for us and let us know how we did. If you like this session, if you like the content, what we can change. It really helps us to put a good conference together for you guys. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Q&A. There will be a microphone coming up that you guys can leverage. All right, so if you have a question, just come grab the microphone and let us know.
I'll go be the mic runner.
All right. And thank you for attending. If you're leaving, thank you.
Security-related questions. Can the extensions, if you get an extension off the market, right, you're referencing a foreign server, can the extensions then at will send data back to that server?
Can the extension send? Yeah, the extension would be sending data back to that server.
Okay, so you need to know that if you're dealing with sensitive data that cannot go back to
Yes.
another server, and you're probably in copyright violation if you want to use that extension but want to host it on your own servers.
So I have talked with, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I have talked with some of the people who publish these extensions to our gallery, and they have said for some instances they will let you bring all the code in-house. So that is an option. I think you're just going to have to talk, if it's a third-party vendor, you'll have to talk to them and be like, can I have the code and run it internally? And then you don't have that same security concern because it'll all be behind your firewall.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is related to the custom visualization question. So how would I call a D3 library? Where would that call be under? Would it be like inside that JavaScript file you were showing?
So yeah, when I popped open my JavaScript file, you would actually you'd probably have a get selected marks, or get all the data that's on the screen. You'd probably pull that over into JavaScript, instantiate your calls to D3, and then create your visualization that way.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, not really. I'm still a very new to. I'm a beginner.
Yeah.
So basically, I call the D3 library in the HTML code.
Yep.
So
In the JavaScript code. Yep.
Oh, so it would be in the JavaScript code. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay, point of clarification, is it Tableau desktop and server, or server, and online, or?
It is, you can use desktop if you want to. If you're publishing it up to server, that extension will still work on server. So it can be both, but the big thing is it has to be 2018.2 or higher. Okay. It will work on online as well. They do not work on Tableau Public. So if you are using Tableau Public, extensions don't work there.
I have a question on the Tableau developer program. So we are operating in an air-gap environment, and we don't have access to the internet. So will that work? Do we have a sandbox?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So if you are in an air-gapped environment, you'd have to write the extensions yourself internally, or again, out in the extensions gallery, maybe talk to those vendors who are providing them and say, can I have all that code to bring it behind the firewall? But you're right, you wouldn't be able to communicate out to those externally facing extensions.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe a slightly specific use case question. I have a number of workflows that run daily that extract API data from various sources and upload it into a SQL server. If I wanted to upgrade my dashboards to read live, would you suggest doing that using JavaScript or TabPy? And I'm primarily a Python user, though I'm just starting to learn JavaScript.
So I don't fully understand the use case. So you want?
I want to be able to read API data live.
Read API data live. So like we were reading here today, we were bringing back from Amazon API, and that was live. So you would be able to do that. Are you saying create an entire visualization with live data coming from an API?
Correct.
You could. It's definitely possible. You've got to remember that you're passing all of that information back through an API. A lot of them will basically throttle you down if you're sending too much data. There's going to be some lag time because obviously if your data's dense, you're bringing it all back through an API call, which is either coming through as JSON or XML and then needs to be parsed. So it's possible, definitely, but I just don't know what kind of performance you'll see there.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, I have two questions. One is kind of related to the previous question on when do you use like TabPy versus like what you demoed, which was like the web connector and
yeah, so I demoed an extension API that talked to the Amazon API. He showed us TabPy, and really the reason he wasn't using an extensions API is we would be required to grab that lat long for the train at any given point, save that to a database, and then allow for Tableau to read it from that database or data store. It doesn't have to be a database, it could be a file. But the point is that there's a write process and a read process from a data store. For his example with TabPy, what he's able to do in those script functions is actually grab the value, parse it right there from the JSON he receives, and it's not stored anywhere. He doesn't want to have the historical record of all the different places that the train went. He only cares about right now, where's that train. So that's why the use case was a little bit different there for him.
Okay, got it. And can you talk a little more about the Trex file? Like, what is it? Is it just, because I'm not really familiar with.
So the Trex file, quite
Trex
simply, is
file.
just a pointer. And it's really going to point Tableau desktop or server to where that extension lives. So if you're downloading from the extensions gallery, it's pointing back to that vendor who created that extension. It's pointing to their web server.
Okay, so if I'm creating an extension, am I going to start with a Trex file?
You'll definitely have a
Okay.
Trex file as part of yours, similar to mine. And what I would recommend is copy and paste and switch the values that you need so you know you have everything in there, but it has your values instead of what the sample did.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, first of all, thank you for the great session. It was really informative. And my question is extension of what he asked about the D3. It's about an extension API. So what I'm trying to visualize is like in case if I have my own TRX and JavaScript code, which pulls an animated visual from D3.js. So let's say like if I pull that visual and displays it somewhere in my dashboard. So my next question is like, is now like, can I have a function in an extension API? So what it can do is like if I do some mark selection in the animation which I brought in from D3.js, it can automatically update my other visuals which I created in using Tableau.
Yeah, definitely. You have the two-way communication from your dashboard to the extension, so you could definitely enable that.
And then second question is like, right now like what we have seen in the example is like we pull the data based on the marks we selected from a specific worksheet. So is there a way like where we could load the entire data which we have in our data source to the code which we write in?
I think so. I'd have to reference back to the API that it specifically answers that. I'm pretty sure you can, but again, our documentation's good, and if I sat here for a couple of seconds, we'd be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Hi, I think I missed where that auto refresh logic was. Was that part of the extension, or was that in your code?
Yeah, so he didn't really show the refresh, the code for the refresh extension. He already, where did you get that?
Yeah, actually, that was part of the samples from the GitHub library that we have, the Tableau GitHub library. It's actually called UI namespace, and I just renamed that refresh as all I did.
Okay.
So you can find it in there. It's the same exact thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Quick short question. So right now, the current beta extension gallery, all those extensions that are hosted on are they consolidated in a Tableau own server, or is it in separate servers?
So really what that extensions gallery is just a pointer to download Trex files.
Right.
So if I click on one, I'm going to download for like Info Topics is one of the ones who created Show Me More there. They're the ones who have the sand key, that nice sand key. If I click on that, it downloads the Trex file into a zip. I unzip it or whatever. I now point my extensions to that Trex file. That Trex file in turn points me out to the Info Topics web server.
Okay. So that's an Info Topics server. It's not a server that is hosted by Tableau.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So in theory, like Info Topics could just discontinue that down the road. Oh. Okay.
Right.
Hi. My question is related to very basic extension. You talked about reading and writing into the database, right, from the extensions. But is there any way to block it, to writing into the database? Just read it. There is options to it, or
Is the question, is there ability for the extension to read from the database?
yes.
Yeah, so anything you can do in a web application, you can do in an extension. So just like I could create a web page that reads from my database,
Okay.
That's definitely possible.
For that, we need to do a custom, extension to just read. The reason where I'm going is like currently our situation is it doesn't support the dynamic parameters, right? If I wanted to, enable that dynamic parameter, can I use the extension to read from the database?
So you could write your own to definitely do that.
Okay.
It would be custom because I didn't see anything on the extensions gallery that is to what you're looking for.
Because I was talking to Tableau team, they said that it might be possible through the extension to automate it. So have you seen anything like that? Just basic, simple one, not reading from anybody else, just from the database. And then
I haven't. Have you seen anything that just reads from a database, Steve? I haven't.
No, it's only been the write backs only. Because if it's reading from the database, you can just connect to Tableau, right, and just pull that back. But I would imagine it's possible. I haven't seen an example.
It's a parameter we wanted to dynamically pass the parameter value. It's a static. Right
Oh,
now.
actually, yes, I have. Yeah, there's actually an example. Actually, Keisha Rose actually has an example where you're connecting out to the data source and then populating the parameter, so that way you can update it. Yeah, so it's kind of a dynamic parameter using extension.
Let me see if that's. Hold on, let me see if we can switch it back over here.
Yeah, we can look.
Let's see. We're gonna go 4 or 3. That should be on the extensions gallery, right?
Did that? It might be, but I thought. Yeah, it could be, but I thought I had seen one. Oh, you mind?
Do you have his email or contact? So that
Yeah, I can give you mine.
Let's see.
Because I'm from Bank of America, and we have very tight security policy in the contract. Okay, I'll contact him. I met him yesterday, but I didn't ask this particular question to him because there were so many people.
Is it this one right here? The parameter actions?
Date parameters based on worksheet. That one's based on worksheet selection. No, I think it might be out on GitHub.
Okay.
I'll find it. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, can you help me better understand CORE's errors as it relates to the web data connector as well as the extensions? So if I use TabPy, would I still run into that same error when I deploy to production or even use it in desktop? So like I wrote a web data connector to go out to this third-party API for our fleet data. I can run the debugger with Chrome if I turn off the CORE's restriction. But when I run it in Tableau Desktop, of course, it blocks it. So,
you might be able. I know that we have. I'm not sure why you'd be seeing that in desktop.
okay.
It's not. The web data connector is definitely not my specialty.
Well, let's say if I wanted to use it as an extension, let's say I just abandoned the whole web data connector. Same approach, basically, because you're making a request to the API, you're getting back JSON. I guess they kind of do the similar things.
Kind of similar. I haven't seen CORE's errors at all in my work with extensions. They haven't manifested themselves, and I think I would have seen them because in my little experience with web data connectors, I ran into CORE's within like the first 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I think you're going to be safe on using extensions.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Great presentations. I've been following a lot of the extension presentations. Related to the write-back extension, here's one thing I'm curious about. Is the write-back writing back to a Tableau extract or directly to a live SQL table?
In my example, it was a live database. You could write to.
You could write to a file as well. Yeah, and then extract it again.
But essentially, it could write to a live SQL table then.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Good. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Would you mind giving just a more high-level explanation of what exactly a custom web connector is?
A custom web data connector?
Yeah.
Yeah, and essentially what that is, you're essentially making a web call. You could use it to parse a web page. You can go out to pull information from Twitter or even from Facebook, and it's creating an extract. So it will never be live. It will just be an extract. It will always be an extract. So every time that you want to refresh it, you'd actually have to go out to that web source and make that call and then pull it back in.
So can they call like a REST API?
Yes,
I don't.
They could reference a REST API.
Yeah, I guess you could.
If you're going down that path, though, I would just say use the extract API. I always tell my customers, if you're debating, should I use a web data connector or the extract API, more often than not, the extract API will be able to do it without running into CORE's errors, much easier to manage. And the only time I think you need to use a web data connector is if you want to have a front-end user interface. So my user logs onto desktop, they're able to pick some values of some data they want, and then that extract is created. If you know what that user is going to want every single time, why not just use the extract API and schedule that either through cron or Windows Scheduler.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.